Hey everyone, today I'm going to be reacting to a video called What is the Difference Between Bees, Wasps, and Hornets from Today I Found Out. This should be good, mostly because people frequently get this wrong, so let's get into it.
In the video today, we're answering a viewer question because Mike A asks us, what is the difference between bees, wasps, and hornets? There are many similarities and differences between our little wing-whipping friends. For starters, they can all sting you. That said, you may derive some solace in the fact that when certain of the
They can't all sting you, there are stingless bees. And also, most wasps will never sting you under any circumstance, because they don't have venom glands.
sting humans, they die. Although it's not true that they do that when they sting other animals. The barbed stingers on honeybees particularly end up getting lodged in our soft flesh, ripping out their backsides when they try and get away after stinging.
So that is true. So apparently, and I'm trying to remember this from a million years ago, it's something to do with the makeup of mammal skin. It's not just humans. We generally have very soft, kind of sticky skin. So when the barbed stinger goes into us, it gets lodged in, and then that sort of stickiness is what rips their abdomen apart of a honeybee when they sting you. With other creatures like other insects, which is what bees spend most of their time defending against, that won't happen because it will just go through the cuticle, it will puncture right through the exoskeleton and inject the venom, and it's not a big deal. That being said, things like wasps and hornets and these other things generally have a different structured stinger, so they don't rip apart their abdomen when they sting you. So wasps have the ability to sting you multiple times.
When they sting most other animals, that simply doesn't happen. Further, all three live in hives or combs. These humble...
No, they don't. There are a lot of wasps that do not live in hives. There's a lot of bees that don't live in hives. The hive structure is kind of unique to highly social insects that are capable of secreting either wax or making paper mache. So this kind of only refers to honeybees and like the vespid wasps.
Birds are always in cooler and sheltered areas, often within the shade of trees. Bees, wasps, and hornets all proliferate in warm weather, their hives growing in the spring and the early summer. By late summer, food becomes scarce, and that's when they, especially wasps and hornets, start finding their way to human food and your picnic. While the colors are all pretty similar, brown and black, yellow, and maybe some white on bees, wasps, and hornets, the markings, they do differ. This is where the insects we all tend to lump into the same category, flying, stinging, and scary, begin to show their differences. Let's start with a humble bee. Bees are very popular.
That is a very sad looking bee. It looks like it's gotten wet and then just was never fixed. So he is right. A lot of these creatures share same color patterns. This is likely some sort of kind of aposematism where you're colored in a way that warns predators that you're dangerous. Although a lot of bumblebees come in really strange colors. So like I used to live in the Caribbean, and there was a very large, very orange bumblebee that you could sometimes see. So they do come in other colors. It's not just black and yellow.
Collectors who rarely ever have any need to interact with humans. As the expression "as busy as a bee" insinuates, worker bees, usually the only type of bee that most people see, spend their lives going to and from the hive, acquiring nectar and pollen on their bodies during their trips. They play an integral part in the pollination of various plants, and some of them they provide us with tasty honey. They feed the acquired nectar to their young, developing the new generation of bees. They also protect the queen bee, allowing her to lay eggs. There are over 25,000 known bee species, but the two most common types of bees are honeybees and bumblebees. Both produce wax, but, and I know this is going to come as a shock, only the honeybee produces honey. Another big difference between the two.
So there are multiple species which we call the honeybee. There's not so there's the European honeybee, which you're most likely familiar with, but there are other, and that's Apis mellifera, but there are other species of Apis that do produce combs of wax that also make their own honey. So that's not just the honeybee that you're most familiar with. Bumblebees do make a honey-like substance, but it's not like the honey that you're familiar with. And then there are other kinds of bees that make honey from other substances. So there are kinds of bees that make meat honey, and I have a video of that on this channel, that they will collect from carrion, like rotting fluids, and they will turn that into honey.
Two is that the bumblebee is nearly double the size of the honeybee. Bumblebees are fat, at least in
Again, I'll right away. Bumblebees are almost twice the size of honeybees. Depends on the bumblebee. The bumblebees that you are most familiar with are larger than honeybees. Although some of you will probably be confusing carpenter bees with honeybees. Carpenter bees are the really large black shiny bees that look like bumblebees that you see during the summer. But there are also some very, very small bumblebees, probably the size of honeybees, if not a little smaller.
in bee terms, and they're hairy. Their size relative to their wingspan gives rise to the myth that science can't explain how they're able to fly. Honeybees are more sleek. They both are yellow with black stripes, although the bumblebee often has a red, orange, or white tail. Additionally, honeybees live in large colonies, topping out at 25,000 bees, while bumblebees tend to build their nests underground, although their nests have also been found in walls, and they're often found in tunnels constructed by other animals.
Honeybee nests can get very, very large, bigger than 25,000. They sometimes I've seen them as big as 50,000. I think I've even seen them bigger than that. I used to do honeybee removal from like people's walls and stuff, and hives can get absolutely enormous, like 100,000 bees or more. Whereas bumblebees generally live like 1 or 200 in a very small hive, usually underground. Or in like a tree hollow, things like that. They'll just go into places that are already empty cavities.
Their colonies are much smaller than bumblebees, only numbering into the hundreds. Wasps, unlike bees, are aggressive and predators. There are over 30.
So wasps are, we say aggressive, but what I always learned that I thought was helpful in this is that none of these creatures tend to be aggressive towards humans. It's a question of how defensive they are. So if you approach a wasp nest, they are more likely to come out to defend themselves. Whereas like European honeybees tend to be not as aggressive or defensive, but there are subspecies of European honeybees that are very defensive. So like the Africanized honeybees or the killer bees tend to be very defensive. Is it German honeybees that used to be really defensive? I think it's the Germans. Whereas like the buckfast bee from Britain tends to be very, very docile. The thing about wasps being predators is not entirely true. So even, I think this is what is this? It's a Vespa, but what is it, a yellow jacket, something like that he's showing. They do eat meat. They will prey on other insects, but they will also feed themselves off of pollen and nectar. A lot of wasps tend to be more omnivorous, or what you would think of when you think of the word wasp, tend to be more omnivorous. They tend to feed kind of like meat products or other insects or arachnids, things like that, to their young, and then they themselves, as the adults, tend to feed on things like nectar.
Thousand species of wasps, and they are distinguishable from bees by their pointed lower abdomens and narrow waist. They also have little to no hair on their bodies as opposed to bees, and they don't play much of a role in the pollination of plants. Their legs are shiny, slender, and shaped like cylinders. All wasps hunt for food, and they build nests for shelter. What exactly they prey on and how they build their nests depends.
So wasps do tend to hunt, although there are groups of wasps that only feed on plants. So it's not like all wasps are predatory, or even omnivorous. Some wasps will only feed on things like trees, like gull wasps that only attack oak trees. But they are not, going off what he said, they are not also associated with permanent nests. There are a lot of solitary wasps that will only live in temporary locations, or they don't form a nest at all.
on the type of wasp. There are two general types of wasps, social and solitary. Social wasps build colonies and start from scratch every spring, never nesting in the same spot twice. They design their home out of chewed up wood fibers and their own saliva. The nests may hold up to 5,000 wasps and are typically found in protected spaces like attics, inside of walls, or under decks. Social wasps eat many different types of things. They are omnivorous, including fruits, plants, human food, and other insects. Solitary wasps do not form colonies and live underground in tubular mud nests. There's no caste system, as in the queen cares for its own young. The queen seeks out prey, flies, bee larvae, cicadas. There's actually a species of wasp known as cicada killers, and they paralyze them with their sting. They take the still living insect back to the nest and feed it to their larva. It's during the late summer that wasps begin to get aggressive. This is due to the fact that the worker wasp's job is done for the year and they're literally waiting to die. After taking care of the queen and feeding the new generation of worker wasps, the old ones, they're now useless. They become disorientated and begin to venture away from the nest in search of food and something sweet. As absurd as this sounds, these wasps have nothing left to live for besides satisfying their sweet tooth, so they become aggressive, bold, and persistent.
So this is something that isn't just unique to the wasps. There are bees that do this as well. But generally speaking, except for things like honeybees, the wasps and or hornets and or bees die off during the winter except for the queen. So the queen will frequently either burrow underground or hide under tree bark or something like that, and that's how she overwinters. She will have already mated with a male, so she is fertile and she's ready to begin laying eggs immediately. But she is the only one that will eat enough food and find a hiding place for the winter. All of her children, all of the workers, well, actually, it's not usually her children. They're usually her brothers and sisters, because the queen that overwinters is generally a new fresh queen, spawned from the old queen. The new fresh queen is the only one that lives. All of the other workers, her brothers and sisters, die off for the winter, and then come the spring, she begins the nest construction by herself. She will usually rear the first generation by herself. And then the sort of sociality of the wasps or bees begins again.
They'll land on a human hand that's holding an ice cream cone, they'll dive into a can of soda, they'll munch on a half-eaten apple. In fact, in September of 2013, the British Red Cross warned citizens that wasps were getting drunk on fermented fruit and were going out in search of more. Joe Mulligan of the Red Cross said to the British newspaper The Independent in 2013, "It's hilarious that now worker wasps have finished their life's work. All they are now doing is feasting on fermented fruit and getting drunk." All that being said, wasps are not just pests, but they benefit humanity in some way. They prey on other pest insects and have actually been used by the agricultural industry as an effective means to control crop pests, resulting in much more environmentally friendly ways to do this over many pesticides.
Yeah, so because wasps tend to be generalist predators, because they're omnivorous, they will just kind of eat whatever is around. If you can get wasps' nests around your crop or whatever it is that you're growing, they will tend to pick off a lot of the smaller pests. So this is an effective biological control if you can get enough wasps. The problem is that wasps, being generalists, aren't going to necessarily kill the thing that you want them to kill.
Hornets are actually a species of wasp. Hornets differ from other wasps in that their stings are more venomous. They also tend to attack for food as a colony, and their nests are aerial as opposed to many wasp species.
So the aerial thing is important. So these are the kind of the wasp's nests that you see in trees. These are generally hornets' nests, but also hornets tend to be much larger than what you would normally consider like a social wasp, like a yellow jacket or something.
Giant Asian hornet, native to parts of Russia, China, Vietnam, and the mountains of Japan, can grow to about 2 inches long with a wingspan of about 4 to 5 inches. It is the world's largest and most venomous wasp. It is colloquially known as the yak killer due to the venom's ability to dissolve the tissue of even the largest of mammals.
So these were the murder hornets. If you recall from a few years ago, these were in the news because in the Pacific Northwest of the US and Canada as well, there were introductions of these murder hornets, these Japanese giant hornets, that people were worried about them becoming established. As far as I know, they didn't get established, but they did end up removing multiple colonies that had formed in trees. I believe with the murder hornets, these Japanese hornets, they tend to uh, nest kind of underground inside tree trunks, like the lower portions of tree trunks, but I could be wrong about that. Someone correct me if you know.
Because the honeybee is, on an individual level, incapable of harming the giant Asian hornet, and just a handful of giant Asian hornets are capable of decimating an entire hive of honeybees, the Japanese honeybee has come up with an alternate strategy to stopping the mass destruction of their populace by the hornets. When a giant Asian hornet is detected, first the honeybee will emit a pheromone that the hornet can pick up, and it basically says, "I see you." The scouting hornet might then leave. If not, and the hornet continues towards the hive, the honeybees will ball the hornet, essentially surrounding it completely with as many bees as possible. They will then exert themselves as much as possible in order to raise their body temperatures. Inside the ball, the temperature will...
So how they exert themselves is the same mechanism that they use to keep warm during the winter. So this is Apis cerari, the Asian honeybee. So this is a different species than the European honeybee, Apis mellifera. But what these guys do and what Apis mellifera does to keep warm in the winter is that they detach their muscles, their thoracic muscles, from their wings. And then they can vibrate those muscles really, really hard without flapping their wings. So they just start vibrating. And this really intense vibration allows them to generate an enormous amount of heat. So in this case, when they do this to an invading hornet, they all vibrate together, and then they generate enough heat to kind of cook the hornet. During the winter, what the bees do is that they form a big ball in the center of their hive, and they all start vibrating, and they're constantly swirling from the outside to the inside in order to get warm, and then the warm ones on the inside come to the outside to cool down. And they do this kind of swirling dance, and the queen stays in the middle, so she knows that she's going to stay warm because she has to survive the winter.
Rise rapidly, while simultaneously the carbon dioxide levels will also increase. Once the temperature inside the ball passes 115 degrees Fahrenheit or 46 degrees Celsius, it exceeds what the hornet can tolerate, but is still well under what the honeybees can handle. The combination of heat and low oxygen level will eventually kill the giant Asian hornet. Several of the honeybees will likely die before the hornet does, and this means of defense it isn't effective against a large number of giant Asian hornets. However, it does work well against eliminating the scouting giant Asian hornet. This can potentially stop a large-scale attack from ever taking place. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do give us a thumbs up below.
Okay, so let me clarify something. Let me pull up some cladistics or some phylogenetic trees here. Okay, so this is just off Wikipedia. It's their phylogenetic tree of the Hymenoptera. And it's good enough for our purposes here. So the issue with calling things bees, wasps, or hornets is that basically everything within the Hymenoptera is a wasp. So Hymenoptera are the bees, wasps, hornets, and ants. This is the order Hymenoptera, which is wasted wing. And wasp is such an ambiguous term is in English. Like, we call everything a wasp. And basically with the Hymenoptera, everything is a wasp unless it isn't. So in Hymenoptera, there's two major groups. There's the Symphyta and the Apocrita. And the Symphyta are the wood wasps and sawflies. So we even call these wood wasps. We even use the word wasp here. So we have kind of the basal sawflies. These are very small groups. It looks like a lot on this chart, but Apocrita is by far the vast majority of things. And then you have the wood wasps. So you have the sawflies and the wood wasps. So we're even calling these wasps. And we call them wood wasps because they're wasps that live in wood. So they tend to eat, all of these tend to eat plant material except for the parasitic wood wasps. I'm not sure anything about this group. I'm not sure what they parasitize. But generally speaking, they eat plant material. They're either eating leaves or they're inside the trunks of trees and they're eating wood and fungus. So that's what the wood wasps are doing. Then you have down here the ants, bees, and wasps, and almost all of these are wasps. So if we go into this, we're inside the Apocrita now. These are all the groups within the Apocrita. These are superfamilies, I guess. These are all wasps. These are all wasps. These are all wasps, except for the Vespoidia, which also has the hornets in it. The hornets are in the Vespoidia. These are the ants. these are all wasps, and these are the bees. So just everything is a wasp. Most of these, so in the Parasitoidea, these are wasps that parasitize either other insects or parasitize plants. So like the Cynipoidea, this contains the cynipid wasps, and these are the ones that form galls. These are the ones that attack plants exclusively. But a lot of these other things, like the Ichneumoniidea, these are wasps that don't form colonies. They're solitary, and they only attack other insects, and they reproduce inside other insects. Down here, these are kind of the free living wasps related to the bees and ants. And this is what the Vespoidea is what we mean when we talk about like the yellow jackets and the hornets and those kinds of wasps. But there's a lot of other kinds of wasps. There's the spider wasps, the tarantula hawks, things like that. You have the roach wasps. You have sphecids, which are like the mud daubers, things like that. And then if we go into the aculeata down here, so there's the Parasitoidea and the aculeata. If we go into the aculeata, or not aculeata, if we go into the Apoidea down here, so the Apoidea is what we generally is the group that we associate with bees. Bees are called Apis. Honeybees are Apis mellifera. Their family is Apidae. The superfamily, I think it's the superfamily, is the Apoidea. If we look within the Apoidea, let's see. These are all wasps. These are all wasps. And these are the bees. They're the Anthophyla. They're the flower lovers. And the big difference between wasps and hornets and bees is that bees generally are herbivores. So wasps and hornets hunt. They tend to be pretty omnivorous, but a lot of them reproduce exclusively on meat. So like the spider wasps and stuff have to supply their offspring with spider meat. Whereas the Anthophyla live almost exclusively off of nectar and pollen. There's a few that live off of other things, like meat, honey, or like the leafcutter bees have to cut leaves in order to build their nests, things like that. But the big difference between them is what they feed on. So bees will be associated with plants, and the reason they're associated with plants is because they collect the nectar and the pollen for eating. The other thing that he did mention is that wasps tend to be pretty hairless, whereas bees tend to be covered in hair because they need the surface area to collect pollen. And then if we go inside the Anthophyla, these are all the different kinds of bees. Honeybees are in this group here, the Apidae. So this is Apis mellifera. These are the honeybees. But there's a lot of other things in the Apidae. And then there's a bunch of other different kinds of bees. There's the megachilids and the andrenids, which form like, they're not true colonies, but they tend to hang out with each other. They take care of their young. You have the sweat bees. And one of the other big differences between bees and wasps is that bees have tongues. So their labium, their lower mouth part, is elongated into a sucking tongue, and that's how they collect their nectar. Whereas wasps just have these very, very large mandibles in order to bite things. Bees have mandibles and this tongue. So there you go. That's the true difference between wasps and bees. Hornets are just a variation of wasps. Ants are their own thing. Sawflies are kind of their own thing, but they're also wood wasps. So, avoid the term wasp as much as you can, just because it doesn't really mean a ton. Talk to you guys later.